Hello, how are you? I'm going to be reading from the Essentials of Strength Training and Conditioning, 3rd edition. I will be on page 114, Overtraining. Overtraining has been a topic of great interest and can be defined as excessive frequency, volume, or intensity of training that results in extreme fatigue, illness, or injury, which is often due to a lack of sufficient rest, recovery, and perhaps nutrient intake. Excessive training on a short-term basis is called overreaching. Recovery from this condition is easily achieved within a few days of rest. Consequently, overreaching is often a planned phase of many training programs. The rationale is to overwork and then taper to rebound in performance. In fact, it has been shown that short-term overreaching followed by a tapering period can result in substantial strength and power gains. Overreaching can become overtraining syndrome if it continues beyond a reasonable period of time. The overtraining syndrome is the condition resulting from overtraining. It is sometimes referred to as staleness. This syndrome may include a plateau or decrease in performance. Many alternative terms have been suggested for overtraining, including burnout, chronic overwork, physical overstrain, and overfatigue. Some use the term overtraining only when a decline in performance occurs. The following progression illustrates the overtraining continuum: overload stimulus and acute fatigue. Overreaching and leads to overtraining. So overload stimulus leads to acute fatigue, and overreaching will lead to overtraining. The overtraining syndrome can last as long as 6 months, and recovery may be delayed. In worst case scenario, overtraining can ruin athletic career. Long-term decreases in performance have not been demonstrated during resistance overtraining, however, and many athletes rebound after a period of recovery. Because rebounds are possible, it is difficult to determine when overtraining becomes chronically detrimental. In addition, some athletes respond to overreaching, whereas others do not. Simply doing too much too soon or repetitive overuse may result in overtraining and potentially an injury. Overtraining can cause dramatic performance decreases in athletes of all training levels. Two distinct types of overtraining syndromes have been suggested: sympathetic and parasympathetic syndromes. The sympathetic overtraining syndrome includes increased sympathetic activity at rest, whereas the parasympathetic overtraining syndrome includes increased parasympathetic activity at rest and with exercise. Some researchers feel that the sympathetic syndrome develops before the parasympathetic syndrome and predominates in younger athletes who train for speed or power, though few data exist to support this differentiation. All overtraining can eventually result in the parasympathetic syndrome. Strength and power overtraining arises when mistakes are made in the acute training program variables and a plateau below the athlete's potential is observed. A theoretical overview of anaerobic overtraining is shown in Table 5.3. Performance reductions may persist for weeks or even months when the overtraining syndrome occurs. A common mistake is a rate of progression that is too high. That is, increasing either the volume or intensity or both too rapidly over a period of several weeks or months can result in greater structural damage over time and potentially overtraining. Sources of overtraining must be examined, both sports-specific in-season practices and competitions, and non-sports specific training modalities, resistance-trained or plyometrics. Only a few studies have examined overtraining models in the laboratory. Purposely causing the overtraining syndrome is not easy in the laboratory setting. Therefore, monitoring athletes may be more practical as a way of documenting overtraining physiological responses and performance effects. A study by Callister and colleagues demonstrated that anaerobic overtraining in national level judo athletes may present a different set of symptoms than aerobic training. Fry and colleagues examined intensity-specific overtraining 8 sets of the machine squat exercise with a 95% 1 rep max load for 6 consecutive days. And reported non-specific performance decreases in isokinetic torque production, longer sprint times, and longer agility times. They also found that 1 rep max strength was preserved. The 1 day of rest per week appeared to enhance tolerance to the protocol. Thus, athletes, coaches, and sports scientists need to examine the athlete's peripheral and global performance abilities to ensure that overtraining in one performance parameter does not occur. In a subsequent study by Fry and colleagues, the 1 day of rest was eliminated in the overtraining protocol so that the subjects performed 10 sets of 1 rep max over 7 days. This has resulted in a significant decrease, greater than 9.9 pounds or 4.5 kilograms, in the 1 rep max in 73% of the subjects. Interestingly, some subjects made progress and did not reach an overtraining state. This demonstrated that the time course of overtraining greatly depends on individual responses, training status, and genetic endowment. This study showed that an exercise stress that is low in volume but high, 100% in intensity, without a recovery day can result in dramatic performance decrements and non-specific variables, like in the isokinetic knee extension peak power, peak torque, and sprints, and training specific variables. Cool, we'll leave it there. That's Overtraining, page 114 to 115. Right? Yeah, there. Cool. See ya.